Where's your polo? This is unprofessional. Oh yeah. Do you want to? I can go. There's a bunch of. I can go get you for the placards. You want me to just go print off like a spreadsheet and just send it around? Or it's just a sign sheet. Hello, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
Can you do the motion to go in camera? Just
I
for
can't.
the help. Oh, that's true.
When are we
Never
going
mind.
to put conference in there? Like this is
Yeah, I'm just waiting. We're gonna get started. Sit down. Can one of you guys, when we switch sections, can one of you guys just like record like the time? Because Nick wants to use it to like timestamp videos so people know where the agenda they can watch or if there's not two videos. I saw it. So like Nick wants when we start doing sections to record the time so that people watching it they can see. You're what? No. I forgot my clicker. This one will be fun. I had the text they're like key access to every single one. Yeah. We have some data. Slides over a little envelope to the exec. Hi. Before I get this report. That's what I want.
Megan, just a quick heads up. So I shared with you the orientation budget slideshow. When we get to that
I just second in case they need to.
Councilor Allison's going to be with Cindy and I, and we'll just do a brief presentation.
Okay. Wait, for which section?
For the orientation budget, I think it's motion, I think it's the fifth or sixth motion.
Alright. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all our sons command. With glowing hearts we sing, we rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh Canada, we stand on guard for thee. You bet. Alright. W's up. Western, Western, Western U, College Fair and Square. Arts and meds are strong for you, deny it if you dare. Let us show that this U is our U, and for her we strive to do our best to fight with might and main. What's Maine? People always adore her alma mater, Western School of Fame. Western U goes marching down the field. You know our team will never ever yield. And even the other team has lots of pep, lots of pep. Our team will know they're out of step. And when the game goes down in history, history, it's another Western victory, victory. Just go out for Western U, Western U. Rah, rah, rah. Canny, canany, canany, canoe. It's a hullabah, hullabah, hullabaloo. Rickety, rackety, rackety, roo. High on sky, Western U. W-E-S-T-E-R-N. Western, 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 woo! polls are now open. Can you please vote one for or two for against? Passing these minutes. Okay, sorry. Or can you just raise your placard then? Alright, awesome. Vote unanimous. Okay, so we're now gonna move on to presentations, starting with President July. Nico, what's the title?
All right, perfect. Morning, everyone. First off, before I start, I just want to thank everyone for coming up this weekend and taking the time to come from either near or far. Also, thank you to our guests who are here today to help out, especially with this presentation. So thank you guys for coming in on a Sunday. So for those of you guys that don't know, we're hosting a concert called Purple Fest on September 28th. So we've been working on it pretty hard the past couple months, and it extended into actually the last executive as well. So we just wanted to give you guys a bit of an update and speak to you guys a bit about the Purple Fest, what we're doing with Purple Fest, and also talk about the greater strategy around the September 28th day and what's happening on Brofdale as well. So since last October, essentially, the USC has been working really collaboratively with the university, with the city, with London Police, Fire, school boards, just sort of to ensure that we're all tackling this together, because we understand the issue on Brofdale isn't just a Western issue. It's become a larger community issue as a whole, and so there's no individual partner that could really tackle it on their own. So this year we've actually been really fortunate to be working really collaboratively with all the partners that we have at the table, and the formal groups that we've been a part of are the city task force that we've been working on at City Hall, along with University, Fire, Police, City, and then the Western Working Group, which is an internal group that sort of focuses on the greater Brofdale strategy. That's chaired by Lynn Logan, our Vice President of Operations and Finance, who's joining us today, and the Purple Fest Steering Committee, which is more surrounding the planning of the actual event that we host, which I chair. So, a bit about the Brofdale Unsanctioned Street Party. So, in 2013, when the homecoming date was still at the end of September, there was only about 3,000. In 2013, there was only about 3,000 students or people, I guess, on the street. And then in 2015, it had grown like exponentially to about 10,000 students. So, because of the concerns of the community, concerns from police, the decision was made to move the date, as many of us know. And Western officials' homecoming was moved to later on in October. So the numbers started growing, and it's really gotten to a point where it's very unsafe, and the crowd is like much too large, and we all can recognize that it's not just Western students. This is a giant community problem. From just what we've been asking students, it seems that the consensus is usually around 50% Western students and 50% non-Western students, whether it be guests from other universities, high school students, community members, just people coming to see the spectacle and get that picture on Instagram. So there are some major safety concerns, which is why the USC is actually taking such a stance like this, is because as we saw last year, there's a lot of people obviously that like to go on the roof and jump off, which we see that there's been a couple injuries in the past couple years that have been quite serious, and there's also been situations where students are in need of medical attention and emergency services can't get to them because of just the crowds on the street. So like last year there was 20,000 students on the street. If everyone here knows what the street looks like, if you can imagine an ambulance trying to get through that, it's not going to happen. So the USC is really focused on trying to encourage that safer alternative, and USC's never really been in the business of trying to quell school spirit, but we're just trying to ensure that our students are celebrating that Purple Pride in a safe environment, and the university and the city are really on board with that. And so it's been great working together, and we're just trying to sort of move along a way of sort of encouraging our students to celebrate their Purple Pride, first of all with Western students, and also in a safer manner. So, which is why what the USC is sort of putting to the table is Purple Fest, which is our alternative programming that we're bringing on September 28th, 2019. So, it's, as many of you know, because I speak about it nonstop, it's the largest university student concert in Canada. This year, it'll be held at TD Stadium, and there's going to be, like, as the same, sort of similar to last year, we're trying to do it on a bigger scale with, like, more activities, vendors, sponsors just around the stadium to make it more of a sort of festival atmosphere. Tickets are obviously on sale right now, and so we've put a capacity of over 10,000. We're hoping to match or exceed the attendance we had last year. So the guest policy this year is that Western students and all these affiliates and everyone can come, and they can bring one guest. There are no in and out privileges, obviously, and it will be a licensed event. So there will be an all ages side and then a 19 plus side for those who would like to indulge. So a little bit of an artist update. So obviously the biggest update is that we're aware of the situation involving our headliner in Stockholm. We're monitoring the situation, and we're collaborating well with the university and the city on next steps. We're currently operating under the assumption that he will be here in September. However, we will update publicly if necessary, and regardless, we believe the concert will still be going on. So just to quell those fears. Other artists will be released throughout the summer as we go along. So other artists will be released throughout the summer as we go along. So we've been working really hard to secure a good lineup that we think will sort of be enticing for students to want to come and celebrate their Purple Pride. And I think we can all agree, I think it's a little bit more fun than being crammed on a street like sardines. So what our ask is really of all of you guys, which is what we're doing this presentation, we can't really change the culture around the Brofdale event without having support from other students, right? And we're all representing the student body here. We're also all student leaders, and I think it's important really to reinforce the messaging that Brofdale isn't really a safe environment. I think everybody knows someone who's gotten hurt on Brofdale. Everyone knows someone who's gotten too drunk on Brofdale, and it's not really a place where we want to really be promoting it. And especially with the changing of the demographic of the people on the street, we don't know many of these people. There's some people that are known to police that have been seen on the street. We just don't have the control, I mean, especially with the number of them as well. So we're really hoping that you guys can all support the USC's efforts in promoting and growing the Purple Fest, and also encouraging sort of the notion that the unsanctioned street party is unsafe, and we're not trying to stop celebrations at all. We're just trying to move them somewhere safer and on campus. So I know the presentation was quite short, but just in case there were any questions. So the questions can be addressed to either myself or Lynn Logan or Leslie D'Souza. Lynn is the Vice President of Operations and Finance and the head of the Brofdale file, and Leslie D'Souza works in student experience and has been helping us quite a bit as well on this file. So thank you. If there are any questions. All right.
So thank you.
Thank you.
We're now going to move on to our second presentation of the day, which is executive initiatives.
All right, so sorry. As I hope everyone did at Nico's request 4 times yesterday, I hope everyone had a chance to look through the executive roadmap that we've created this year. So essentially, what the goal of this roadmap is basically to sort of present our strategy for the next year as a team. So, when Kat and I were running, we had our own platform. When Cecilia was running, she had her own platform. And when Declan and Nico were in the hiring phase, they also had their ideas. And then when we came into this role, we sort of had the opportunity to learn and to see the capacity that we have and what's really like possible for us to do this year. And so we sat down as a team and really went through everything we had, and took quite a few days to figure this out, but we've now sort of narrowed down the hundreds of ideas we had to 22 priorities. And sort of the goal of it is to receive like feedback from you guys, because we were trying to promote the transparency and accountability of the executive to council and to the students, and sort of to seek your support in moving forward for this, because we know in like a year like this, like in a year like the year we have today, like this year, it's important really that we show what we're doing to our constituents, and also have that accountability to show that we're not just twiddling our thumbs. We're actually trying to do the best we can to improve the student life here at Western. So there are new initiatives of our executive team, and to our knowledge, it's the first time that an executive has actually like publicly shared sort of a team platform type document and priorities. So yeah, as I said, it consolidates hundreds of ideas, and again, it's not like a comprehensive list of everything we're doing. These are just sort of initiatives that are going to be taking up a big chunk of multiple executives or staff's time, and it like outlines sort of our highest level priorities, but it doesn't all go into the details of our day-to-day operations. And it also is really just like a living, breathing document, as any platform really should be. If there are other projects or initiatives that you guys would like to bring forward, we'd be more than happy to listen to them, and this will be updated as we go throughout the year. We will be providing updates to you guys as we go. And yeah, so the roadmap is actually, so it's based on like a mix of a lot of things. So goes in hand with the 2017 strategic plan that's called Dear Students. It goes hand in hand with Kat and I's platform. It goes with Cecilia's platform, and it goes with sort of just the strategic priorities and our mission values of our team. And it was, again, a group discussion we had over quite a long time. So just to review, like, one of the biggest documents that the USC sort of uses, which is our strategic plan. So obviously our mission statement to enhance the educational experience and quality of life of all undergraduates at Western, and our vision is that students have the power to change the world. I think that the vision statement is pretty powerful going into this year. I think we have a federal election coming up, and I think one of our priorities you guys will see is sort of that increased engagement with that. And I think we have to really start showing that we do have the power to change the world today and tomorrow. So these are the next one. Nice. So on the right, you can see, so those are our focus areas of the strategic plan. So it's student development and opportunity, student advocacy, student support, student engagement, collaboration, and student life. Everything within our roadmap relates to at least one of these. Many of them relate to multiple areas of our focus areas. In this presentation, it doesn't show, but in the yes. Yeah. So these are the focus areas, and every sort of priority or initiative we have stated in our roadmap does relate to at least one or two of these, or multiple of these. So we've tried to stick as much as we can to our long-term strategic plan. It won't be available in this presentation, but in the sort of the roadmap that was shared with you guys by Nico, you can see there's like little icons on the side that show which pillar of the strategic plan it aligns to. And these are our values on the left side. Sorry, I'm looking at the computer screen, it's weird. So we are democratic, we are inclusive, we are student-led, we are accountable to our students, and we operate with integrity. And I think those kind of speak for themselves. We really strive to display those values every single day, and we can continue to do that through the initiatives that we have planned. So first, obviously, our first priority is the student choice initiative. And so these aren't necessarily in order of importance, but it's important to mention the student choice initiative first, because it's something that sort of underlines everything we're doing at this point, and it's something that should have been a focus before, but it's never really been an issue. And what I mean by it should have been a focus is we should have always been showing our value, because I think everyone around this table can agree that the USC does provide a very large value to our students, but we've always sort of had we've all sort of never had to face a situation like this where we have to prove that value. We always just provide it and assume that's enough, and I think that really has to change. And I think we really, really want to be putting our best foot forward in every opportunity, representing the USC and representing our students to the best of our abilities, and also really being accountable to them and working for our students. And so our team has really worked hard, and as you guys saw in our presentations yesterday, we are working hard to sort of evaluate the situation. And again, as this is something that no executive really has ever had to deal with before, we're learning every day about what to do best. We're not saying that we're perfect, but we're trying our hardest to make sure that we're sort of navigating this environment as best we can. So something that's quite related to it is our next priority, which is the USC brand. So obviously part of showing that value is having a way for students to connect to the USC, and part of that is a big part of that is our branding. We want to be relatable to students. We want to be like, we want students to be comfortable to talk to us. We want students to sort of know what the USC is doing for them, know that they have a support in us, and know where their money is going. So a big focus for us this year is sort of improving the brand around the USC and making sure that every interaction a student has with the USC, they know that that's where their student dollars are going towards, whether it be in the Spoke, whether it be at peer programs, whether it be at Purple Fest. So student feedback. So this one falls under mostly under Nico's portfolio. So really involves us constantly gauging student, like the student environment, this sort of the atmosphere around campus, and seeking their input on our services, on our programming, and on our advocacy. And we really just, again, want to be more accountable to students, and really want to make sure that everything we're doing is for the students and what the students would like to see. Next is USC elections. So facing the biggest existential crisis the USC's ever seen, all of us in our elections, or most of us in our elections, I don't know if affiliates do it a little bit differently, but most of us in our elections saw 24% turnout. So that was disappointing, and I think we all know that we're going to see a change in the way that slates are organized next year. It'll be the president running alone. So this year, a big thing we want to do is sort of make sure that the elections are as accessible to everyone as possible, and that we really do a good promotion of them. We're doing this also by reforming like the elections and by modernizing bylaw 2 a little bit. This is something that we're actually going to be speaking with all of you about as we go, because I think everyone here was involved in an election. So you guys saw how bylaw 2 worked last year, so we'd like to receive your feedback on that, which kind of goes to the last point, student feedback, yes. And we're going to sort of be promoting the positions that are available all year, sort of explaining what the positions do, what each executive does, and how, and sort of like what the organization really is, to sort of entice students really to become involved. So then next is young civic engagement. So if there seems to be a lot of like apathy again, speaking towards the 24% surrounding politics and civic engagement, and I think going into a federal election this year, it's really important that we sort of promote civic engagement and political literacy, as Councillor Keenan mentioned yesterday as well. And I think we're going to be using the federal election as sort of a catalyst to get the conversation going, and that's an initiative that's going to be led by Vice President Dunn and our communications officer, Nico. And then next one is council engagement. So as you saw in the presentation yesterday by our Secretary Treasurer, Declan Hodgins, that we're really trying to make sure that council feels as if they're really a part of it, and because we work at your pleasure, right? The executive works for you. We want to make sure that everything we're doing is representing you guys and your constituents, and we want to make sure that you guys have your voice in absolutely everything we do, and we want to make sure we're offering you guys the best professional development that we can, because I think what else is this other than a learning opportunity, right? Next is the USC Foundation. So again, I mentioned this a little bit yesterday in my alumni presentation. So the foundation was launched finally in 2018, and we've sort of started operationalizing it and working towards funding for our 3 pillars of sexual violence prevention, mental health, and experiential learning. So we're going to be prioritizing sort of foundation activities and supporting the efforts that the board does, and so that we can ensure that we can get some funding in case of a negative result from the opt-out situation, that some of our essential services don't go underfunded, and that we can continue to stay aboard. Next, Purple Fest. I sort of touched on that in the last presentation, but again, we're really just trying to promote the safety of our students while they celebrate their Purple Pride. Community relations. So, community relations are really important because we are a very large population of the North London, and we are a huge economic driver of the city. And again, we're a major partner with the whole city, so we really want to make sure that we improve the community relations that we have. We're going to be working with the city quite often. We're working with our ward councilor, we're working with city staff, we're working with London Police Fire, school boards, and we really want to make sure we're working for our students, but we're also sort of bridging that gap that we have with our community. And then last on this page is Campus Trust. So Campus Trust, for those of you that don't know, is sort of our health and dental plan, and our very own Secretary Treasurer sits as a trustee on the trust. So what we want to do essentially is, we know that the health and dental plan here could be much better, and what we're going to do this year is sort of work to make sure that that our health and dental plan are sort of reaching the needs that they need to, and that they best align with the priorities of our students. So now to advocacy. So these are, again, very four sort of areas of focus and priorities that we're going to be doing in our advocacy, and that'll be led by Vice President Dunn. So first we have gender-based violence. So up to 1 in 4 women attending university will experience an incident of sexual assault. That's a number that really is unacceptable. We saw from the provincial data that they provided at the end of last year that Western is knowledgeable on consent, but doesn't practice. There's a serious issue surrounding our campus about involving gender-based violence, and Vice President Dunn and myself and our whole team, we're going to be really working towards setting up initiatives, looking at policy, reworking sort of frameworks surrounding sexual violence and gender-based violence to ensure that we're taking a step in the right direction, and we're sort of keeping the momentum going and working towards finding, hopefully, a better future for all of our students. Next is affordability. So obviously the price of university rarely goes down. It's increasing quite regularly, and the financial burden on students is increasing again with the cuts to financial aid across the province. So the USC at its core really believes that everyone who's willing and qualified should be able to access post-secondary education, and it's something that we're going to be working on to advocate to the province on. Sustainability. So again, students care about sustainability, and I think our generation is really set to lose the most at this point. So we're going to be working really to create a working group surrounding, or as we mentioned yesterday, create a working group around surrounding sustainability, and advocating to the university, to the city, and seeing what best we can do to sort of improve the community around us as well. And again, we'll be working with all of you hopefully on this. And the last is jobs, so employment. So like work integrated learning and like work opportunities are really at the heart of sort of the university experience for many people. I personally always like to say that like a lot of learning can come from the classroom, but most of it comes outside of it. So we really want to make sure that students have those opportunities while in university to get those work integrated learning opportunities and experiential learning. And we also want to make sure that our students are best equipped once they graduate to find employment, and find employment in their fields that they really would love to do. So we want to make sure that our students are graduating like very employable. Next. So campus issues. So the number one thing we heard was academic counseling. So that is something that we're definitely we're working towards with the university on, and currently I think there's some work going on to reform it a little bit, and so we're going to be working closely with that. And again, that's going to be led by Vice President Dunn. And then next is menstrual products. So again, the USC led like a pilot project last year under our former SPO, Karina, to ensure that the UCC had free menstrual products in all bathrooms. So now that we know that in all public buildings there will soon be free menstrual products, we're going to work to try and ensure that in the university's operating budget there's a line, so that we can be a leader on this as well, from a university perspective and not just from a USC perspective. Gender identifying spaces. So the difference between like a gender identifying space for a student coming in can be the difference between feeling welcome or just feeling isolated and rejected. So what we're really trying to do is ensure that all students really feel included. As one of our values is we are inclusive. So we're trying to, whether that be from gender neutral bathrooms in all new renovations and new buildings to the women's and trans only hours in the rec center, we're going to be working to ensure that we're inclusive to all of our students. And then last is resident staff. So as many of us know around the table, that the USC endorsed the supported resident staff for improvements to health and safety, compensation structures, and workplace culture last year. So we'll be continuing those conversations this year to ensure that the university makes meaningful changes to address serious concerns regarding the workplace culture for resident staff. So some of the initiatives that we're going to be running. So State of the USC. So for those of you that don't know, the State of the USC is sort of like an annual update done by the president and the executive, sort of update on the progress throughout the year. Historically has not been very well attended. And what we want to do is really, especially in a year where we're trying to show our value, we're really trying to sort of increase the engagement with that, and so hopefully be able to provide an update on this roadmap and sort of invite community partners and make sure that it's more of an update on what the USC's done halfway through the year than just a classic 5 people sitting on a podium in the atrium speaking with no promotion. So just in terms of our transparency and our accountability, that's a big one for us. Women in House. So the Women in House initiative was really successful last year, and we really hope to continue that one through this year. We're really trying to promote the female representation in politics, and we saw that with the Ask Her campaign, and you guys will see later on in the USC mentorship program that we have going. So we'll expand the Women in House initiative to support female student leaders, not only on the Women in House trip, but throughout the whole year. And then student leader development. So this is something, again, I mentioned yesterday. So there are thousands of student leaders that are either like directly or indirectly engaged with the USC, whether it be from being like a club executive to a SOF, to being a counselor, to being president. So we struggle though to provide sort of like the meaningful like leadership opportunity development for a lot of them. They sort of just go in, do the O week and then leave. So what we really want to do is make sure that we're providing sort of that professional development and that growth that we know we can. So we want to again, with the council engagement, with the potential for joining working groups, with like more learning sessions for student leaders, and like we can focus sort of on topics within our respective portfolios. And something that I'm going to mention as well in my executive report, which is coming after this, is that one thing. Another thing we're trying to do is sort of create a shadowing program so that students at large can sort of spend a couple hours with one of the executives to see what that like looks like. And then the mentorship program. So USC has always been like committed to supporting all of our students, and what we really want to do is ensure that we want to equalize the way that so that everyone can reach their full potential. So we recognize that students from racialized and marginalized communities may not have access to the same mentorship opportunities as their peers, and what we're really doing, and this was again through our student programs officers portfolio, we really want to work to create a mentorship program that specifically caters to connect minority and marginalized students with personal and professional mentors to help bridge sort of the development gap that currently exists. And yeah, so those are our 22 priorities. So again, this is not an exhaustive list of everything we're going to do this year. This is just like a high level of like the priorities that we have going into this year. And we will, again, be providing updates as much as we can. We're doing this sort of to be transparent, to show what we're trying to do, and we do honestly believe that we have a very good opportunity this year to make these changes. And as we said, we'll be updating as much as we can. So now I think I have some time. If we'd like to open up the floor, any of the 5 executives would be more than happy to answer any questions you guys may have. Thank you.
I'm just going to interject really quickly. I'm going to call it a point of personal privilege, but it's not really. I just want to encourage everyone to really ask questions and hold us accountable, because although we love that you trust us, like this is the forum to make sure that we are representing our constituents. So ask the hard questions of us if you question anything that we're doing, and we'd be more than happy to answer them. And I'm sure Lynn and Leslie are still around, so if you have questions surrounding Purple Fest, ASAP Rocky, Rockdale, now is the time to really inquire and represent your constituents. And if you have any questions or gray zones, I think it's really, really important that you're holding us accountable, and I'm sure you will. So thank you, everyone, for letting me do this out of order thing.
Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor. I just was curious in the executive roadmap, what sort of metrics, excuse me, of success you guys are setting out for yourselves. I think a number of the things are very easy to identify that it's been a success. For the Women in House, for example, you talk about expanding that, whereas things like sort of reinventing academic counseling, that seems like a broad, multi-year issue. So if you could just explain that a little bit.
So we're under no illusions that like every single one of these will be complete and done in a 1 year span. We're not ending sexual violence this year, but as much as we would love to. But I think an issue with a strength and a weakness of the student union is the 1 year turnover. And I think we don't know where we're going to be at the end of this year, especially for something, say, like academic counseling. But we know if we don't get the ball rolling on it, we're not going to make progress. It's not something that is going to continue. So for each individual thing, so it really depends on the executive whose portfolio it falls under, has sort of their own metrics for success. So this year, we want to reduce wait times in academic counseling. We want to ensure that there's sort of an online option to submit forms and find forms online, so you don't have to wait 3 hours to get a form, go sign, and then wait another 3 hours to hand it in. So these are some of the metrics for that, and so each of them is pretty individualized, because for something, again, like Purplefest, the goals there are quite obvious. The metrics for success, though, are still being discussed with us and the university to see exactly, because we know, again, there's no silver bullet. It's not going to end this year. We're not going to throw one concert and then Brofdale is now a peaceful little street. Like we're trying to work to basically start working on that change, because again, the 1 year turnover is very difficult, and we're hoping that whoever is in these shoes next year can continue the successes we've hopefully had.
Nico Waltenbury, Communications Officer. To Councillor Carlson, I think like you bring up like a great point, and that's something that we're still working on with the executive roadmap. So for some context, like it has taken a long time, and just echoing what Vardia said, like to put this together. There are, like as you can imagine, like hundreds of different ideas like when we come into these roles, and then as we learn what the reality of our jobs are and the reality of the climate that we're operating in at the university and politically, we try to synthesize them down. But you're right, it's clear that we still have to develop like key performance indicators to measure success, and that will be the next step in our journey. And if that's something, if I'm hearing that that's something that council wants to see to help hold us accountable, then that's certainly something that we can build into the roadmap like in the next few weeks before we publish this to aid you in holding us accountable. There's going to be some things that like we simply can't, but the ones that are more measurable, like we've thought about that internally, about how we can make this into like smart goals, like to really ensure that we're striving towards something. But some of them, like improving community relations, for example, like I get that we need metrics to hold ourselves to success and to know what we're aiming for, but at the end of the day, those are going to be really challenging ones. Some of them are going to be more simple, and I think that we can commit to providing those metrics, especially for the more identifiable ones in the next few weeks, if that works.
Councillor Morrison?
Thanks. Is this on?
It's on.
Is it? Is it? Okay. Councillor Morrison, HUCSC President. One thing that really helps my council that I've been implementing this year, this is literally just a suggestion, is that under each box you just start publishing like maybe what groups are involved, and that's like a good way for helping people understand what structures of council like do what in like the actual deliverable part of council, and it also helps everyone understand just like the inner workings of council in general.
Yeah, that's actually a great idea. If you could send some details of that to our communications officer, Nico, that'd be really helpful. Not to task you with any more things, Nico.
Clark Keenan, Social Science.
That's my bad. I called on him, but my bad.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Keenan.
Councillor Keenan, Social Science Counselor. Just looking at the advocacy portion here, under affordability, it says that you're doing some great work, especially advocating with the government about grants and whatnot. But what can the USC do more as like concrete, specific, difficult goals to work on affordability? What are some kind of more concrete plans that you might have in that area?
We do have quite a few, so I'll pass this on to our Vice President, Caton.
Amazing. Thank you for the question. So I'll go over this a little bit in my exec report, but I think internal to the university and the USC, we have an undergraduate student support bursary program that student donations go towards each year, which is an endowment, and we're definitely working with the university to see what we can do to kind of revitalize what that fund looks like so that we can provide more grants to our students that are really going to be needing it this year. So that's one thing that we're hoping to work on over the next, well, we've done some legwork, but we're going to get in some meetings over the next couple of weeks and hopefully see some progress. And then provincially, it's really just working with the government to see what we can do with regards to OSAP. I think any reverses to the changes would be welcomed by students. So that's really our two big priorities at the moment with the affordability file.
Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor, this is to the Purple Fest point, and yourself, or anyone in the gallery can answer this one. You spoke in your presentation about the consultation with some of the external stakeholders that took place, being like London Police or City Hall. Are they on board with this plan? Do they think this is like a good way of moving forward, how you have it planned out, or are they expressing concerns that may not have been yet addressed?
Everyone's been extremely supportive of these plans. I can honestly say I never expected to see this much collaboration on a file like this. It's taken up, like, in all honesty, it's taken up a very large portion of our time working on this file because it's so multifaceted. But the city, the London Police, London Fire, school boards have all been the external partners have all been very, very supportive, and the university's been an absolutely fantastic partner on this with us. They've been supporting us. They've been supporting us and giving us a very good counsel on this. So we're very lucky that this year, I think everyone's sort of recognized that this isn't send an email out and tell everyone not to go to Rochdale type year. This is something that we have to all work on together to get to a goal that we have, however many years away it may be. I can't call. Sorry.
Thanks so much, Councillor Michelle Vijay, Social Science Councillor. So this question is about the mentorship program. I don't know if it's essentially been fleshed out yet, but I have a couple questions that kind of go in tandem. Is the program going to be capped, and is there any sort of application, or can any student of a marginalized identity participate in the program?
I'll pass this on to my student program officers.
Perfect. Sorry. Thank you for your question. So this mentorship program is, I want to say, a bit more high level and strategic, and has not been fully fleshed out yet in terms of logistic details. But with that said, I think this is a really great opportunity for counselors to approach myself and sort of tell me what they would like to see. It is, what we have on paper right now is what we've been working on. So if anybody would like to collaborate, and if anybody would like to give criticism or have ideas, this would be a fantastic opportunity.
Hello? Is this on? Okay. Councillor Hugh, Ivy Councillor, this is just another Purple Fest question, but I was wondering if you can go over the contingency plan regarding the Highliner in case it does not go according to plan.
The USC and the university are monitoring the situation in Stockholm, and we're aware of the situation, and right now we're just waiting until we get more information, and we'll provide more details if necessary.
Any further questions? Yeah, Councillor Carlson.
Councillor Carlson, King's Council. Sorry, you were kind of evasive on that point. So is there a contingency plan in place should the artist not be released from custody? Like, you don't need to tell us anything, but just, is there something, or is it just a sit and hope?
I'm afraid legally I can't answer, but rest assured, the USC is monitoring the situation very closely. But again, legally I can't really disclose it, but I'm going to just ask you guys to trust me on this.
David Carlson, King's Councillor. Can I just provide 2 points of feedback on the roadmap itself?
Please.
I personally find the icon dots kind of confusing. Okay, cool. And also the signatures at the end of the letter, I think they're nice in concept. Barty and Cecilia's look really nice. The other one, okay, amazing.
Yeah, the graphics side of it kind of came together in like 24 hours. So 24 minutes, sorry. So that's why, so the ideas and everything on there are sort of the more important part. The whole graphics side of it will be beautified. Yeah, I'm back. I'm still here. All right, perfect.
Can I raise a point of personal privilege? Sorry, I'm just wondering if the two members in the gallery would mind staying just for the first motion, just because it pertains to university roads, and you might be able to provide some insight if the USA executive is opposed to that. Okay. Sorry. Thank you so much.
Okay, and actually on that note, if everybody could check their emails, there were some changes to this motion made this morning, so if you can just take a minute to review these changes, because we'll be debating the motion for the version that was sent out to you this morning. And actually, if you don't have the laptop with you, the changes, the updated motion is actually on the screen here. If you want to just take a second to read it over. Alright, so now that everybody's had a couple minutes to look that over, our mover, Councillor Alshamil, would you like to speak to this motion?
Yes, Zain Al-Shamil, Health Science President. So this motion is basically the spirit of this motion is just addressing the issue of the roads on campus. Over the past 2 years now, I've heard various students come up to me and tell me, the roads aren't really safe. People really like to speed, especially going up to Natsai and near the tennis bubble and down like the health sciences, like those fields. So there's been concerns of cars that are just like flying by there without really a concern for the speed limit or students, and this is especially dangerous at night. So essentially what this motion is saying is we're tasking the executive to advocate and look into the financial feasibility of potentially putting down speed bumps along campus roads and affiliate roads, of course. And we've already I've spoke with Kat as well as I've spoke with the executive as well as a couple other councillors to help build this motion, and we've gotten pretty good support.
Alright, and so since Councillor Cronin's not here, could I get a seconder for this motion? Alright, Councillor Keenan, would you like to speak to this motion?
I affirm the sentiments of the previous councillor there, and I think that it's really important as we work towards a more kind of pedestrian-friendly campus and in the future, especially with just safety concerns in general. Moving towards that, especially the area coming from that side with the buses is very dangerous as people speed from the stop sign towards the next kind of entrance to Western Road there. And I think especially if you're on a bicycle or something else in that area for other modes of active transportation, it's very dangerous and could be a health hazard. So something just to be considerate of in next motions.
Alright, thank you, Councillor Keenan. Are there any questions on this motion? Alright, Councillor Hunter?
Councillor Hunter, Brescia President. I was just wondering if there's any conversation of is it just speed bumps that we're looking at putting in, or is there other road safety precautions that we were thinking about? Because I know there's issues with potholes and students who have had to go to the hospital because of injuries caused by the actual road when they're driving, like a motorcycle or bicycle.
Alright, Councillor Alshamil, would you like to answer?
USC Prez, would you like to answer that question?
Okay, or President Jalire, would you like to?
Yes. So, I just took that. I don't know why I did that. So in our consultation with Councillor Al-Shamil, we mentioned that speed bumps may not be the best way necessarily to go about this. So we have the changes to it were that implementing more safety precautions on roads, so that we sort of have the flexibility in our advocacy to the university. And if I still have time, I'd like to yield my speaking rights to Vice President Operations Finance of the University of Logan.
Thanks, Bardia. So thank you for the question and thank you for the advocacy. No one can be more passionate actually about campus safety than I am. It is part of what my responsibility is at Western. And I also led, about a year and a half ago, the open space strategy, which will ultimately take Western as vehicle free. And so of course I'm equally passionate about that. One thing I do want to clarify though, just before we start, is that you can only advocate to Western for Western, okay? If you want to do any advocacy to Huron, Kings, or Brescia, that needs to be separate, okay? So, because if I don't know the potholes you're talking about, but certainly as you hear of safety issues, please do not hesitate to come to me directly. I see the police report every morning from what's happened the day before, but if there are things that are happening that aren't getting reported to police, then I'm not seeing it, nor is maybe my facilities management team. So we would really want to know the incidents that are happening, because that will actually inform our timeline as to how we proceed with our vehicle free. So, and I do also really support what Bardia said in terms of modifying this so that you're looking at it from an overall traffic calming, because we are looking at that. We look at it regularly. I think speed bumps we looked at. The consultants that we used during the open space strategy didn't identify that as the best strategy. But nonetheless, you know, I think it's one of the things that we can be looking at, but we are looking at traffic calming measures. We are seeing that there is an awful lot of speeding that does take place through campus, which is why we post the speed limit signs, hoping to identify for people. We're going to be taking the sidewalks more and more away from the main by the roadway so that they are more interior to the campus, and a lot of that will start happening next summer. We're actually underway with the second phase of the open space strategy after we did the removal of parking at the front of University College. Now we're going to be doing up Middlesex, as well as the north side, shall we say, of Kent Drive by Physics and Astronomy and Macintosh Gallery. So all that area will be done. We're by Music as well, taking by Talbot, taking the sidewalks away from the roadway and having them go interior to the campus, and beautifying that area as well. So I'm very happy to take this certainly back and work with our consultants on additional traffic calming measures. I'm not sure you really have to advocate all that hard, because I truly support it. I'm not sure, Councillor Hunter, when you spoke, were you speaking of something that happened at Brescia or something that happened at Western?
The incident I was talking about happened on main campus. It was somebody on a motorcycle and they hit a hole and they went over. That was a specific, and I know there's been stuff at Brescia's campus too, but
That's separate, yeah. And so, I mean, Philip Aziz is not Western's, okay? So we can take responsibility for what's in campus, except for coming down Philip Aziz and as it makes the turn to Huron, right, on Huron Drive. The second item that you've talked about here is the City of London. So one of the things that we are doing and have been advocating very strongly, actually, with the city, is to get back the environmental assessments underway for both Richmond and Windermere, as well as Philip Aziz Sarnia Western Road. That's not under our control, but I'm already a big advocate of getting that underway so that that particular crossing at Philip Aziz Sarnia Western is the busiest intersection in the city, and I think one of the most dangerous for our students. So we are in a big way advocating for that environmental assessment to get back underway. It was stalled with Bus Rapid Transit, but it is part of the work that we do with the city to try and get that back underway so that we can actually have a safer crossing for our students at that intersection.
All right, Councillor Carlson.
Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor. I think some of my questions were answered, but my main question was that would be pursuing additional advocacy like that run potentially counterintuitive to the open space strategy that Western already has in place? Or would the additional advocacy be beneficial to students in the short term?
Councillor Alshamiel, would you like to?
I'll let you handle that one too.
Well, I think so. The open space strategy, again, is a long term. I think we can sort of work towards the interim measures, and again, all the advocacy we're going to be doing is going to be, a lot of it's going to be just discussion to see what's possible with Vice President Logan. So we're not going to be saying scrap the open space strategy, let's do this, and just because we passed this motion, we're going to make sure that everything we're doing is feasible for the short term until we get to the long-term goal of that open space strategy.
Alright, and Councilor Barosa?
Victoria Brosa, Science President. I totally agree with the spirit of the motion. I think it's great, and thank you for bringing it up. I would caution, and I guess it kind of leads into my question. I worry about like tasking the executive to do this. I was wondering if it was considered to create maybe like a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee where we could gather the appropriate either like external partners or appropriate executive members to kind of look into this rather than just like tasking the executive. Like we know clearly that they have a lot of things on their plate and bigger projects that they're looking to accomplish this year, and not that this is not a big project or not an important project, but some of those like nitty gritty details as to like who we should be advocating to and like you know, what is potentially the best option or the viable routes in pursuing this. Could that potentially be achieved through like a smaller group of potentially a subset of this group of people or other external students who have had experiences that want to be part of this conversation?
Councilor Alston, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so when we were initially coming up with this motion, I actually talked to Kat and like we spoke about it before. I am open to taking into like a subcommittee and having them discuss it as such, but I do, in my personal opinion, from what I know, I do think that, and I personally feel like this should be a timely manner, especially since students are going to be coming back to Western soon. I would rather see something happen sooner rather than later, but I'm totally open to taking it back to like a subcommittee if the executive feel like this is not something that, you know, they're able to take on at the moment or as such.
Councilor McLennan?
Danielle McClennan, King's Counselor. I would like to just propose an amendment to remove the affiliates from this motion, just because it doesn't really concern us.
Sorry, I missed that.
Oh, yeah, I would just like to propose an amendment to remove the affiliates from this motion, like the
Oh,
section on the
just save that one, we're actually in the debate period, please. Alright, any further questions? Yeah, President Dunn, Vice President.
I'm going to yield my speaking rights to President Gelayer.
Alright.
So just sort of to go of what President Barroso said. So I completely agree actually that sort of tasking the executive with certain things could eventually become a bit problematic. But however, with this, I also agree that it should be going into a subcommittee or working group, and that is something that's on our radar. With this motion, it's sort of a little bit like non-issue because this is something that's been on our radar, and again, with having Vice President Logan in the room as well, I think we've sort of made our goal clear here, and whether we will be taking this to a working group regardless of motion passing. So, do that as
We can do both.
Alright, any further questions on this motion? Alright, so seeing none, we're gonna move to debate on this motion. This would also be a time to make amendments. Alright, Councilor McLennan?
Danielle McClennan, King's Counselor. I would like to propose an amendment to remove the affiliates from this motion.
Alright, and can I get a seconder for this motion? Councilor Kozak? Alright. Okay, so we will just do this vote by hand. So those in favor of moving the affiliates from this motion, please raise your flag. Alright, so the amendment passes. We will remove the affiliates from motion 1. Alright. Okay, I'm just gonna edit this later, but the minutes will reflect the motion as amended. Yeah, Councilor Campbell?
Hello. I would like to propose an amendment to the motion. So in the second bullet point there, it says the USC executive should to advocate to, and I propose that we change it to the USC executive should advocate to the city of London.
Yeah, just, it's clerical, so we don't lose
Councillor Kozak, King's Councillor, speaking in favor of this motion. Just for context, this motion did go through the Advocacy Standing Committee during our July meeting. We made an amendment to it just to make sure that the language didn't propose that it was the USC's job to implement these safety precautions, that it was an advocacy initiative. But once we fixed the wording of that, everyone was on board with it, so we passed the motion at our committee meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. So this was a paper that Councillor Ann Campbell tasked us with in our first council meeting, I believe, to develop this policy paper. And my associate / intern, Mackenzie, has been doing some phenomenal work really rushing this through, given the changes happening at the provincial as well as the university level, where we have to review our sexual violence policy by the fall. So we really wanted to make sure that we had significant standing policy to go off to when we're making recommendations to the university. And I think it's a climate where this policy paper and these recommendations are welcome. So I think it's really important that we pass this today. At this point, I'm hoping I can yield my speaking rights to Mackenzie so that she can actually go through the paper quickly and take any questions on it. Okay, amazing.
Okay. Hello, everybody. If you don't know me already, my name is Mackenzie Metcalf. I'm CAT's Associate Municipal Affairs, as well as one of the advocacy research interns this summer for the USC. I have spent the last 3 weeks working on this policy paper, doing all the research and the writing with documents from CAT's portfolio. So I was just kind of going to go through really quick what was in the paper. Hopefully you all get a chance to read it and look over it, and then Kat and I will open up the floor to any questions you may have about the paper and what is in it. So basically why we are doing an interim paper right now and not the entire paper is because of the provincial priorities that were set. So the university has to review their sexual violence policy by September. So we wanted to make sure that this was passed and got the rubber stamp of approval from council, just to make sure that when CAT was advocating to Western's administration, we really knew that we had Western and students' approval for the things that we were advocating for. So just so you know, the PCRs, so the have been approved by the Advocacy Standing Committee already, with the exception of one added recommendation, and then Section 3 was broken down into 3 subsections just for clarity. So there are 4 main buckets if you look at the policy paper. We have the policy changes for Western's policy. So this was based on Kat's work that she did last year with Danny. She worked with a provincial advocacy group. It was called Our Turn, and now it's Students for Consent Culture. And basically, they went through all the universities in Ontario and Canada-wide and kind of arbitrarily almost graded very different policies based on how strong they were and how they supported survivors. So we used this rubric to kind of inform Western's policy and what we think that they should implement for survivors as well. And then the next one was residence policy. So if you don't already know, residence has a separate procedure for sexual violence prevention. So the main recommendation for this section is to actually amalgamate all of the policies, so no matter who you are on campus and what your relationship is to the community, everybody has the same experience reporting and dealing with instances of gender-based and sexual violence on campus, as well as some similar recommendations that we made for the policy changes. The third bucket is going to be programming changes. This is improving and kind of consolidating existing program that exists on campus, as well as the implementation of a couple new programs. And then the third one is advocacy initiatives. So these are kind of outward-facing things that CAT can bring provincially and municipally and federally with our advocacy initiatives to kind of change the culture around gender-based violence in society and on university campuses. So that is everything about the policy paper. Hopefully you all got a chance to review it. And now I'm going to open up the floor to questions if anybody. Oh, no? Are we not doing that? No, not yet. Oh, sorry.
I'm good. Yeah, good job.
Councillor Hunter, Brescia President. I was just wondering, you said you want to make sure that the reporting is the same for all students on campus. Was there collaboration with the affiliates to make sure that the residents there and their policies are aligned with this? I was just wondering because I didn't see it correctly there, so I wanted to make sure.
Thank you for the question, Michaela. To be completely honest with you, I think that's an area that we still need to do some growth with. Residents' policies at the affiliates is not something that we are super familiar with at this point, but I think it's a gap that we definitely want to ensure that we're working towards. I think it's important to remember that the Central Western policy governs, to my understanding, all of the affiliates. So if there was a centralized policy, which is what we're hoping for, then all of the students would actually be going through that policy. And that's our point, so that we don't have this disjoint between all of the different residence policies, which can be really, really confusing for SOFs and DONs and RAs, as well as our students to navigate. But I think you're right in that in the interim, we should be working with the affiliates to see where they currently are. That being said, I think the recommendations that Mackenzie have made are kind of best practices for what should be happening in the interim in residence. And I think that we can work with your student councils if you want to implement those. Yeah.
Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor, I just want to commend you for the fantastic work that's in this paper, Mackenzie. And I'm curious as to know, you spoke about the external stakeholders in a working group that Vice President Dunn was a part of when she was working under Vice President Chang. What other external stakeholders were spoken with to develop the direction of these recommendations to ensure that they're as effective as possible?
So,
do you want me to speak to it, or do you want to speak to it?
I can start it off, and then
Okay,
if you
great.
want to keep going.
I'm going to yield to Mackenzie for now.
Thank you. So this was a very long process of like the research and the background and everything that I did to create this paper, and definitely built off the research that Kat did as an associate. So we collaborated with a lot of different groups on campus, Ally Western, Spectrum Western, just to make sure that the policy did deserve the X in the name in replace, just to make sure it was really, really inclusive for everybody. Looking at best practices from other universities, what they were doing in their policies, municipally, federally, provincially. We're looking at policy papers from our provincial partners like USA and different areas, just to make sure that we were really on board with the trend and where this was going, and also making sure it's as survivor-centric as possible.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, so Mackenzie did a lot of the research, and I would say that we kind of worked together on the direction for where this was going to go. And people that I directly had meetings with to inform the direction of this paper were a couple of the different CAMH researchers in Research Park who actually specialize in gender-based violence in bars and in alcohol settings. So looking at like best practices for intervention there. We've been working with Student Experience on their sexual violence framework, so making sure that this is actually going to be working with the university. And it's all headed in a direction we can collaborate on, and that's where you'll actually see the one added recommendation came off of one of our most recent framework meetings, where they're really working to move upstream to more prevention and looking at kind of like healthy sexuality and how that can inform consent and sexual violence. So I think that's super cool. And so that would be Danielle Carr, the Sexual Violence Prevention Education Coordinator, as well as Aaron Hooner, who's the Director of Research and Assessment at Student Experience. I'm trying to think of who else. Those are the most recent people we've consulted with, but this has been a pretty long project since Mackenzie got started as an intern, and as well as my own work that I did previous to stepping into the role as Vice President.
Councillor Hunter, Brescia President, speaking in favor for this. I think the work that was done on this, it was really well done. It's an amazing policy paper. I would just urge, that affiliate engagement in there, just because I know a lot of affiliates are using a lot of the resources that are provided by main campus, because our campuses just don't have the capacity to do that. So I really want to make sure that the affiliates are included to the best as they can be in this.
Vice President Dunn. I'm speaking in favor of this motion. Mackenzie has been working so hard on this since she got started as an intern/associate, and I think it's very comprehensive. We first sat down and looked at all of the different PCRs and areas for growth, and each time I kind of came back to Mackenzie with, oh no, we have a gap. We need to add something else. She managed to make it possible, even though she has a bunch of other projects on the go as well. And I think it's also really great because although this is an interim paper, I think the sections in this can really be final, and we're just going to be adding a couple more things about what we can do on women's safety more broadly, so things like lighting, stuff like that, in the fall. But I think this is a really solid foundation for us to continue our advocacy with relation to gender-based violence on campus and provincially.
Councillor Figurani, I'm also speaking in, Councillor. I'm also speaking in favor of this motion. Is this working? Okay. Yeah, so the paper went through the Advocacy Standing Committee's meeting in July, as Ellie mentioned, and I just want to again commend Mac and Kat for all their hard work. Like, in our meeting, they went through each and every single point, and inside the paper, and it's so well-rounded. It also does address queer populations and ensures that our trans students also are going to feel safe because of this paper. I also think it's so great because it does advocate for one centralized policy instead of the separate ones that exist for people on residence, which for me was personally problematic. Like, as a SOF, seeing that students would have to use various services. So yeah, speaking in favor of the motion, please pass it.
Yes, please. So since this is Anne's motion, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I can speak to what the discussion was at our meeting. So essentially the rationale for this was just that right now SOFs aren't given a survivor-centric best practices, and we wanted to include ANOVA in that. She also spoke to why it was the SPO specifically that had been mentioned in this, and it's just because she has a really big involvement in Orientation Week, and she has spoken with Cecilia, and Cecilia is on board. Kat also expressed support for this motion, so we have the executive backing on this. And this passing this motion would make it USC standing policy, which would branch out to all of the affiliated organizations underneath the USC, which will help make it more centralized moving forward. Our committee had no concerns, so we passed it unanimously.
Darlene Song, Social Science Counselor. I'm actually going to be speaking on behalf of Anne Campbell, who is not present this weekend. Just her words further emphasize the importance of developing this training program. So this will be a verbatim of what she has said to me. Sexual assault is a difficult topic for me to discuss. I have seen firsthand the tremendous effect it can have on one person's life, but it makes me mad to discuss it as well. It makes me mad that I have to remind my friends not to leave their drinks alone at the bar. It makes me mad that I have been warned as a first year that I should never go to a frat party because they'll spike the drinks. It makes me mad that they drunkenly yelled at us and said, "Shut up or someone will be raped," as the cops came to the door. It makes me mad that O week and first semester should be the best time of the first year's lives, but somehow along the way it can become the worst due to traumatic sexual experiences that can impact both the survivor and their entire community. It all makes me mad, but instead of staying in this toxic space, it is important that we work proactively as a community to address the clear failure surrounding sexual assault on our campus. This resolution does not intend to be the great fix to sexual assault on campus, yet it is an important step. SOFs are an integral part of a first year's experience, and it is our duty as elected leaders on this campus to ensure that they are prepared to deal with situations that sadly we know will occur. First year sexual and mental health is at stake, and this motion is an important step in addressing their well-being.
Councillor Carlson, King Councillor, I'm just wondering if any consultation has taken place with the communities of practice pertaining to this, and if we know that implementing this motion would be too late in the timeline to have it included in this August end-week training.
I'm going to pass this to Cecilia.
Thank you. Cecilia Liu, Student Programs Officer. So in terms of communities of practice, unfortunately the timeline does not work too well because they do not meet in the summer. They only meet during the school year. However, we are currently in our preliminary stages of planning end week, so it's very possible to integrate this as we've only really blocked off time. Secondly, we have consulted with CMHA, sorry, not CMHA, my apologies, ANOVA about like the possibility of this training, and it is very possible.
Councillor Al-Shamil, Health Science President. Just a question out of curiosity, just because I honestly don't know what exactly would survivor-centric training look like. Can you just explain that a little bit?
I'm going to pass this to Vice President Kat.
Thank you for the question. I think it's something that I've done some learning over the past couple of years as well. Okay, so survivor-centric. When we think about policies and procedures that are survivor-centric, we really get to the root of what is gender-based and sexual violence about. And a lot of the times it's about power and taking away control. So we really want to make sure that in every policy and procedure that we're endorsing that are at the very crux of it, we are putting the control and choice back into survivors' hands, and that should be the #1 priority, and that's a best practice that ANOVA, as well as pretty much every sexual assault center that I know of, endorses.
Councillor Ali, Science Councillor. I was just wondering if it outlines who would be in charge of creating developing a program like this, because it's obviously a very important thing to do, and would it be a subcommittee, or whether or not you mentioned communities of practice or anything like that, or would it be tasked to the exec?
Kat.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So we have talked to Danielle Carr, who's the Sexual Violence Prevention Education Coordinator, and we've also been in talks with Kelsey from ANOVA, who is the Interim Executive Director of ANOVA, and they have both committed to working together to develop something that's both survivor-centric and also works within the current Western frameworks that exist.
Okay, cool.
Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor, sorry, just one other question about the training specifically. Do we know if there'd be a cost associated that ANOVA would charge to conduct this training?
I don't know. Vice President Dunn can.
Sure. Yes. Okay. So there would be a cost associated, but we already have grant funding that we've gotten for it.
Councillor Hunter, Brescia President, speaking in favor for this motion. I think I've seen training done in End Week because I've been a part of it for Brescia, because they do a 3-day and they have one that's kind of very similar to this, but I think having all SOFs get a training that is survivor-centric and getting that training, I don't think anyone can ever be prepared to help a first year fully, but at least having the resources that they know where to go, they know what to do in that situation will really benefit our
first-year students and benefit all of our students.
Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor, speaking cautiously in favor of this motion. I think the spirit of the motion is extremely important to ensure that all of our student leaders are being educated in the most effective way possible around something as serious as sexual violence. But I worry about motions such as this coming from council circumventing the Orientation Ops Committee and O staff. I have a worry that if continual motions that are related to directly the training of the orientation program, which is the oversight of another body that the USC does play a large part in, may erode their effectiveness in the future. So while I do think this is important, I think council should be cautious about continuing motions such as this in the future and ensuring that they're being channeled appropriately.
Thank you, President Gelaire, USC. Speaking in favor of this motion, just so to Councillor Hunter's point, I think I've been a SOF in the past, and I've unfortunately been in the place to have to deal with like situations of sexual violence where I've had to support a student, and the first thing that happened was confusion. There's there's just not real clarity on what to do in the situation. So I think bringing something like this forward is really important to support our student leaders and our SOFs in our first years. Councillor Carlson's point, I think the spirit of this motion, while I completely agree we should not be circumventing operations or advisory, what this allows the executive and specifically Student Programs Officer Cecilia to do is speak with the endorsement of council and therefore the endorsement of our students towards this at those committees, and not just on behalf of the executive but on behalf of the council as a whole, which is why I'm speaking very in favor of this motion.
Would anybody like to speak against this motion at this time? Alright, so are there any objections to this motion? Alright, so seeing none, we will move to call question. Polls are now open, please vote. Alright, and polls are now closed. Alright, so we're now going to continue on to the governance and finances committee's motion. Alright, so this motion is to approve the Rural University Service of Canada fee committee terms of reference. Alright, and so since Councillor Morris is not here today, can I get a mover for this motion? Alright, Vice President Dunn. And seconder? Alright, and Vice President Dunn, would you like to speak to this motion?
I'd like to yield my speaking time to Declan, Secretary Treasurer Hodgins.
Yes, is this thing on?
Yes.
All right, so, so to briefly speak to this motion, for those that don't know, and I did bring this up at my presentation yesterday, but for the record, I'll go over it in full. One of the fees that the USC administers, and is now actually one of the optional fees, is I believe it's 84 cents a student fee that goes towards the Student Refugee Program Fund. So last year there was about $24,000 that was distributed through that fund. And it basically goes towards supporting student refugees who are attending Western University, and it helps them afford their academic and living expenses. Historically, this grant fund has actually been administered by the WUSC Club, and then they would pass on funding requests to the USC, and we would approve that. It kind of came up on our radar as a bit of an issue because, as fantastic as the WUSC Club is, the role of a USC ratified club is not the administration of $24,000 grant funds. That is not why clubs exist, and it actually led to some accounting issues. So we engaged with the WUSC Club, and we explained our situation, and we worked with them to come up with a solution that would basically allow them to continue to be involved and giving the fantastic support they do to student refugees, while being able to move the actual approvals process for funding under the WUSC grant fund directly under kind of the central USC. So what this motion recommends, or what it establishes, is a committee that will be basically chaired by the grants coordinator, who's one of my coordinators, and it'll comprise as voting members 1 counselor who will be elected probably September council, as well as 2 hired students at large. And it'll be the job of this committee to confidentially review funding requests for student refugees and administer the funding under this student refugee fund. So that's what this policy establishes. And additionally, one of the things that we worked with WUSC on, because they wanted to continue to give input, is there will be 2 spots on this committee, non-voting, for WUSC designated executive representatives. And that will allow them to continue to have an input into our process and continue to give the valuable support to refugees who are currently students at Western, without having the issues that come with having the approvals process lie in a quasi-autonomous body that we originally saw.
Sure. What he said, and also just an additional thing that this, with the way it was before, it puts a lot of pressure on our full-time staff to make judgment calls on basically club expenditure that are very difficult decisions to make, and this would take a very large ethical dilemma away from our full-time staff.
Councillor Kaduhada, President of Arts and Humanities. I was just wondering if you could elaborate on why the 2 representatives from WUSC are non-voting positions on the committee.
I would like to yield to Secretary Hodgins. Treasurer, Secretary Treasurer.
All right. Thank you. So to elaborate on that, in effect, we didn't want, for a controls perspective, it wasn't really appropriate for them to be in a voting position because, again, we wanted to take away the actual approvals process from the club. So they're on the committee so they can be in an advisory capacity, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure that, we have to treat, actually under our policy, all clubs equally. And for example, giving a club a special vote on a USC internal committee would actually be in violation of that. What this allows is that they continue to be in a representative capacity and they can give information, but the actual approvals process no longer lies with the club, and it instead lies entirely with basically USC representatives, both from council and the student body at large. So this will make it a lot easier, again, for our accounting department to be able to competently process these things. And again, when you have the approval, and that includes having votes in this committee lie with an external body, that does lead to issues. So what we've done is we've kept it internal. We've put the WUSC Club as an advisory body, and actually talking to both their outgoing and incoming presidential teams, we've had their full support on this.
Sorry, just another one. Still President of Arts and Humanities. So I was on the WUSC executive a couple years ago, and I'm aware that sometimes situations come up during the school year where, for example, a student will find out that they need to get they need to get braces, or then suddenly some school material broke and they need a replacement right away. So how would this process kind of mitigate the spontaneity of those issues, considering that there are scheduled meetings that are determined at the beginning of the semester?
I'd like to yield to Secretary Treasurer Hodgins.
I would actually say in this case that this will actually increase the ability of responsiveness, because one of the important things to remember is under the old system, basically what happens is it was, yes, they had a rapid response time, but it would basically be a WUSC executive dipping into their own pocket and being reimbursed. What we can now do, because again, the approvals process lies internal, is we can actually leverage things like, the USC accounting department has just a fantastic array of different payment options, and they can be arranged on a very short lead time. And if necessary, again, because this is chaired by my grants coordinator, if there is something urgent that comes up and there is not time for the committee to get together, we can provisionally approve it for later ratification at the committee, and literally, like, I can go and personally organize the payment things using basically USC payment methods, as opposed to, again, having to put all of the financial risk offloaded to individual members of the WUSC executive and just hope they get reimbursed. So that's what I would say to that, is that it'll actually really increase our ability to respond on a short notice, because again, I'm ultimately overseeing this organization, and I'm working full time to always be available to respond to these kind of things. So I think it would really actually help make it better.
Speaking in favor of this motion, I think Secretary Treasurer Hodgins has done a lot of really great work on developing this terms of reference for this committee and how this can work. And I think it's a really great motion for internal governance, but I think it's also a really great measure for helping the student refugees that need these grants the most, and ensuring that they can get them in a timely manner. And also, like Secretary Treasurer Hodgins just iterated, how it can take that risk off of students who also may be struggling with affordability, and it can take that weight off their shoulders.
I'd like to defer speaking on this motion to Spo-Yu or Secretary Treasurer Hodgins. Oh. Student Programming Officer. Just point of personal, there's no seconder on this motion currently.
Okay, would somebody like to second this motion? All right, Councilor Adams.
I'd like to defer my speaking rights to Secretary Treasurer Hodgins.
Hello, everyone. So as mentioned, my name is Cecilia. I'm the Student Programs Officer. This is Declan with me. I'm the Secretary Treasurer. So just for context, we worked hard together during the months of May and June in consultation with many stakeholders to develop this budget with the USC, with folks from Western University, and with O staff at large as well. Alright, so I'll give a little bit more context into the orientation program itself. So the orientation program is a partnership between the USC, UWO, and the affiliates. So as mentioned yesterday, there is an advisory board, an operations board, and then many communities of practice. And on each of these committees, there are many representatives from different communities on campus, as mentioned, Western University, the USC, and affiliates, including head softs, students at large, counselors, and other members as well. Oh, sorry, could you just go back? Yeah, thank you. The OPAC budget is funded through an optional student fee administered by the USC. So this fee has actually always been optional. First-year students have always had the ability to opt out of this fee. So it's the same this year, even though the climate of the provincial government is changing and a lot of other fees are optional as well. I'm now going to pass this on to Declan.
Yeah, so under the Student Choice Initiative, we've seen certain changes that have come about in the way that we're able to finance the orientation program. And there's three big ones I want to highlight. To start off, it is now a little bit easier for students to opt out, and we do have to project a little bit of a higher opt-out rate, even though it has always been opt-outable. Second of all, and this is very substantial, is, as much as we like to, treat the orientation program as its own independent partnership, it is important to note that it is at the end of the day the USC that does act as effectively the banker and the bankroller of orientation. So we have had to really redo the way that this budget is organized. Historically, what we've seen is there was an $100 student orientation fee, but there were a whole bunch of other orientation expenses that were also paid for by the USC that were taken out of the base fee. As you know, the base fee is what we can no longer charge under the Student Choice Initiative. So as a result of this, what we have is basically a situation where we've actually had to take the money that used to come out of the base fee and actually, through a full cost accounting method, allocate that out into all of our different programs, including the orientation fee. So you will see the orientation fee goes up, and that is because we've had to take some of our expenses that used to be housed elsewhere and house it all under this single budget. And the final thing is, again, because of the Student Choice Initiative, it has been necessary for the USC to take on tighter control over our finances. And that's why we've developed this internally this year, rather than having it being developed by OSTAF. We had to develop it internally. We have extensively consulted with OSTAF on this. And we've also had to redo a little bit the accounting controls surrounding it, again, as a reality that is facing us under the Student Choice Initiative. This is how we're adapting to meet the situation.
And I should have mentioned this before, but in your agenda, there is the actual budget itself. Hopefully you have taken a look at it, so for any questions at the end as well. All right, the next. Perfect. Oh, this is also you.
Right, so speaking of controls, the orientations program's accounting has been aligned with a lot of the other USC operations. And we're applying basically now the same controls to it that we've applied to every other USC operation and to every USC club. So one of the important things as well to note, just regarding the orientation budget, because this is something that a lot of people are not aware of, from an accounting perspective, the orientation budget is what's called an expense account rather than a balance sheet account. So under a balance sheet account, which is like what a club would have, surpluses and deficits will both roll over. Whereas under an expense account, which is the way orientation is always run, if the orientation program runs a deficit, the US, like let's say it runs a $30,000 deficit, the USC will actually eat that deficit. And if it runs a surplus, in the same way, the USC will keep that surplus effectively to cover deficits from other years. But that is the way that it's organized, and just wanted to clarify that to everyone.
All right, so in terms of revenues, so this year we are assuming a higher opt-out rate. So historically we have had a very, very low opt-out rate, but as mentioned previously, it is now much easier for first-year students to be able to opt out of the orientation program. So in creating this budget, we assumed an opt-out rate of 5%. Secondly, we now have an additional $18.26 as a USC administrative fee. So this is what came out of the base fee that no longer exists under government mandate, as Declan had mentioned previously. We also have applied HST. Do you want to speak a little bit more to HST, Declan?
Yeah, so again, partially as a result of the Student Choice Initiative, there's certain fees that we have had to apply harmonized sales tax to, and the orientation fee is one of them. So You'll note that on the fee bill, it was $100 last year and is now $130. So that's because we had an $18 administrative fee, but then we also had to, on that entire $118, add harmonized sales tax on top of that as well. So it looks like it's getting substantially more expensive, and that is, it's stuff beyond our control that's led to that, quite frankly.
All right. So this is our estimated revenue. It's also in all of the spreadsheets that was sent to you last night as well. So we are estimating our OPAS purchases to be 6,716, and then those are the numbers for OPAS revenues and other revenues as well, totaling to just over $800,000.
So big addition to this is the new, we're calling it the USC administrative fee. Again, it's $18.26 a student, and I just want to go over why we're adding this in a little bit more detail. As I'm sure you all know, the USC has about 35 full-time permanent staff working for us, and they work in things like, most notably in this case, our accounting department and our entertainment productions departments. The orientation program, for instance, puts our accounting department basically on hold for like a month because there's so many transactions they have to process. Similarly, our entertainment productions department, this is like the main thing they're working on right now, is the orientation program. And there are substantial expenses that are related to this, and there's also things like USC promotions, communications, things in Cecilia's portfolio, and other things like that, that again, we used to eat through the base fee, but we can't do that anymore under the Student Choice Initiative, so we've had to allocate it out to the orientation fee. So it covers, things like the salaries and the other associated expenses that come with running the orientation program on top of our direct program expenses that we make that comprise the previous $100.
All right. So these are the constituency support fees. So we administer constituents separate budgets in order for them to put on programming. So it totals to $31.63 per student, and that's the total number up there as well, just over $200,000. So as I said before, they are allocated to all soft teams in order to run programming. So there's a breakdown, and they are different between faculty, residents, and OC, and then also affiliate teams. So it comes to $15.33 per student to faculty teams, $16.30 per student to resident and OC teams, and then $31.63 per student to affiliate teams. So next up we have the directly administered programming budget. So this is the budget that was covered by previous budgets, meaning that this does not include the USC administrative fee. And this totals to $71.37 per student. So the categories for this budget are training appreciation, so that includes SOF appreciation, LST appreciation, OSTAF appreciation, SOF resources, OSTAF, administrative fees, promotions, OPAS, transportation, OPAS kit stuffing, charity, and other programming as well. And this totals to just under $500,000. All right, amazing. So that is the end of the presentation. So once again, if you have any questions just about the Excel spreadsheets that were sent to you from the agenda, feel free to ask them. And yeah, thank you.
Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor. I found it very helpful in committee when you guys explained a little bit more on how the USC and the orientation staff reached that 5% predicted opt-out. So I was wondering if you could just explain that a little bit to the rest of council. Sorry, yes. To Secretary Treasurer Hodgins.
Okay, so to kind of explain that, we really are in a state of ambiguity regarding this. We don't know exactly where it's going to land, but we do have a certain degree of historical data that we were able to base it off of. So what we did is we effectively said, all right, historically we literally have like 40 opt-outs a year. Like its opt-out rate is like ridiculously low for orientation. So we basically said, maybe it will be like that again, but it'll probably be a little bit higher. We don't know how much higher it would be, but we said 5% as an assumed opt-out rate. That is, considering that there's historically been about 40 opt-outs in an already opt-outable environment, it's a pretty aggressive opt-out projection. So we basically, for our projections, the best way we could do them was we took the numbers that we have available from Western's Department of Institutional Planning and Budgeting, and then we applied a 5% opt-out to those. And that's the best data that we have to work with. And although we are in a situation where we don't know exactly what's going to happen, we are fairly confident that regardless where it lands, we've definitely taken it on the conservative side. So that is what we're confident about to a large extent.
Speaking in favor of this motion, both Student Programs Officer Liu and Secretary Treasurer Hodgins, in collaboration with orientation staff and all of our partners, have worked really hard on creating this budget. And with projections, as Secretary Treasurer Hodgins mentioned, I think it puts us in a really good place to be able to continue our history of having the best O week in the world. So, that's not a good fact, but yeah. So I think it's a really great budget, and I commend them for their work, and I encourage everyone to vote in favor.
Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor, speaking in favor of this motion. I see the orientation program as one of the most integral, most important piece of programming that the USC offers. I think the passing of this motion is extremely important, and I also think it's important to note, as Secretary Treasurer Hodgins had just spoken about, the 5% projection of opt-outs for the OPAS sales is an extremely conservative number. It's again, there's a high degree of ambiguity around it, but like he said, he's placed the USC in a position that should there be a greater number for some reason, the USC will still be in a position to not be overburdened by a cost in that, and can adjust costs as we approach orientation week. Could we first seek a seconder for the motion? Can we seek a seconder for the motion? Thank you. And I'd like to defer my speaking rights to the student programming officer.
Hello. All right. Cool. So as I was saying, this programming budget is one of my budget lines within our executive budgets, which was presented at one of the previous council meetings. So in total, I have $85,000 to spend on what we call general programming. So that includes anything that is not within the peer programs, the orientation program, and then when I say programming, that means underneath my associate programming. So for example, Enviro Western, Theatre Western, or the Peer Support Center. So this is general programming that the USC does, and sometimes we do collaborate with other services that are also under my portfolio. This is just for this budget line specifically. And you were all sent this spreadsheet as well, so feel free to ask any questions afterwards as well. I'm more so going to talk about how this came to be and maybe explain some things that are a little bit more ambiguous, and I won't go through it line by line because I think some of them are quite obvious. So this was created in consultation with many of my associates and coordinators, really emphasizing on what they wanted to focus on this year, while also incorporating many initiatives that were on my platform. So, just to begin, I split this up into a few categories. One is just general programming, and more so miscellaneous, concerts, speakers, de-stressor programmings, and then peer programs initiatives. So in my platform, as I was campaigning, I really emphasized that the peer programs were extremely important to me, and I think this shows through in my budget. So to begin, I'll explain some of the things I think that are very pertaining to council, and that may be a little bit more ambiguous. So the first thing on my budget is a counselor and SPO portfolio mixer. So I am held directly accountable to council, and it is difficult sometimes for this to be the reality, because there is a bit of a disconnect between counselors and coordinators as well. So this is something that I would like to hold at the beginning of the year, just so you are all well acquainted with my coordinators. Otherwise, a lot of these things are quite obvious. I'll move on to concerts and speakers. So right now, these are very rough estimates of what speakers or performers would cost. I have not gotten quotes for every single performer, as we are working on this quite diligently throughout the summer. But this is kind of an estimate of what I would like to spend. The numbers might fluctuate, obviously, depending on what the quotes from different performers are. The next thing is de-stressor programming. So I don't remember if I don't know if you remember the We've Got game and VR escape room things that has happened in the atrium before, but just passive events for students walking around. I also have lines for International Women's Day programming, USG, the mentorship program that was previously mentioned in our executive roadmap, which I'm splitting in between this and my initiatives line as well, and then internationality and mental health, which is something that my associate peer programs really want to focus on this year. The last line that I'll talk about is what I call initiative programming. So I realized that throughout the summer and throughout the year, there might be coordinators, counselors, associates, or just students at large who may come to me with different programming and initiatives that they might want to run. So for that case, I set aside $10,500 just in case anybody wanted to collaborate with myself, and I really, really hope that you all will. So please feel free to approach me if there are any ideas that you have, and that if you want to work with the USC. So yeah, I think that's about it for me. So any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Thanks.
Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor, speaking in favor of this motion. I think the student programming officer did an excellent job explaining this. There's some fantastic programming that she has lined up. One of the most important ones that I think is beneficial to us to bring back to our faculty councils is the initiative programming line, that block of money that she spoke about, which can be really beneficial for running programming if different faculty councils need, or affiliate councils need assistance, monetary assistance in running them. So I think that's a fantastic addition to the SPO budget, and I commend her for the hard work.
Okay, so speaking in favor of this motion, as many of you know, the SPO's executive budget is the largest out of all 5 executives, and it's not an easy task budgeting all this. So first off, I'd like to commend the student programs officer for the incredible work that she's done creating this budget. And I think, as Councillor Carlson said, there's a lot of great additions to it, and it really focuses on the goals that we have that are laid out in our executive roadmap, and I think it's really putting us in a good position for the future.
Do we need a seconder first, and then I'll speak to it? Oh, amazing. Thank you. Yes, I will speak to it then, Vice President Dunn. So this is a motion that a previous King's Councillor, Chris Anthony, drafted with me when I was actually an associate last year. So Chris last year was on the LGBTQ2+ subcommittee, and he worked with his committee, and we also worked with Ally and Pride, as well as myself at the time, working essentially in the Associate University Affairs portfolio, to figure out what is the best kind of terms of reference to be the most effective advocates for LGBTQ2+ committee or community that we possibly could be. And this is the product of that. So he really wanted to make sure that this did not get lost in council turnover, because I would agree with him, it's super important that our voices of this community are heard at the council level and are then communicated into actionable concrete items. And I think that this subcommittee can allow us to do that effectively.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Carlson, King's Councillor. I want to echo the points made by Vice President Dunn. A lot of the work that the previous King's Councillor, Councillor Anthony, did on this committee last year was making sure that it would be as functional, as effective as possible, and has the potential to add some real value to council's work. So I hope this council is able to see the value as the previous one did.
Hello. Councillor Adewusi, Science Councillor. This is for, I guess anybody can answer this, but probably Vice President Dunn. So in the document in Section 5, it has a list of all the documents or amendments that were passed by the subcommittee, but it only mentions one thing, a motion from 2017. Do you know if there's any other documents or any work that was done by this subcommittee last year or in years prior?
Sure. So I don't have a comprehensive understanding of the history, but I think Councillor Hunter would be able to speak to that a little bit better because she was on the committee last year. I do know in previous years they were instrumental in championing gender-neutral washrooms, and I'm sure I can defer to Councillor Hunter to talk about the specifics of what they did last year.
Councillor Hunter, Brescia President. So last year I was the chair of this committee, but of course the King's Councillor did take a lead on a lot of the projects. A lot of what we did was supporting groups like Pride Western and Spectrum in their events and activities and making sure their voice is heard. Pride Western did a lot of research last year, so we did bring that up as an advocacy effort to bring up a paper. That was something that Councillor Anthony worked on last year. We're also talking about, for this year, working on a page, like an LGBT specific page, either posted on USC or Western. That was something that we had started on but didn't get to completion last year. Then there's another few small projects, and the year before it was the gender neutral washrooms was a big issue that they brought up. I just had Councillor Hunter, Brescia President. I just had a question about the wording "create an LGBT," like the creation. Since this has been in existence for 2 years, I was just wondering about that wording, why it was create and not continue.
Yeah, I think that it's because these are committees that I believe, and Secretary Treasurer Hodgins can probably speak to a little bit better, through our governance protocol have to be recreated each year, but he can probably clarify that a little bit further.
Yeah, just so I could speak to that in a little more detail. These committees are effectively made on an ad hoc basis each year, which is kind of it is effectively the same thing as a working group, and it would be possible for council to pass a policy for standing working groups or subcommittees such as this one that would exist year over year. However, our current approach, and this aligns with that, is that working groups and subcommittees happen on a year-by-year ad hoc basis. So it does need to effectively be removed each year. And what that allows is that every single year, council can reassess the priorities and realign what exactly the working groups that are going to exist are going to be. Unlike the way the standing committees exist, which is basically kind of a set structure for every year that carries on year over year.
Councillor Hunter, Brescia President. I also want to ask if it would be worth adding in that we actually elect the members of this committee today. I just bring that up because I don't think if we elect these members in September, it gives the group enough time to start on the projects and get them to completion and make those relationships with the other members we'll be working with, such as Pride Western or Allyship Network. I know last year it was elected in the summer, or I believe it was elected in the summer. It might have been at the first meeting, but I felt like the committee started a bit late, so I was wondering if that's something that the motioners would consider maybe changing about this.
Okay, if you want to propose it, we'll just leave that.
Yeah, I'm not proposing it. I'm just bringing it up.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so speaking on our questions, we'll now move on to debate on this motion.
I'd like to propose an amendment that, I'm not going to say this right because it's too much, that we do, that we hold an election after this to elect the 4 members, 4 counselors to sit on this committee.
Point of inquiry. So are we able to do that? Just are we able to do the election and also?
Special speaker power that we have.
Okay, cool.
It's better.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate it. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I hate it. It's so weird. No, no, I like everyone. So far, I've liked everyone. Like, I've never been a fan of Saga. Very much. It's a toss-up. It really is. It's steady. Very steady.
motion like 3 minutes.
Fuck yeah.
Yes. Once this motion's done, we're recessing for lunch. Do we think there's value in something? I think what we told the wave we'd be there for 12:30, so. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That makes it more like okay. Is it time sensitive? But like, is there like a strict deadline that's coming up? Because unless there's like a legitimate like, oh, next week we have this meeting, this has to be done. You can't bring a new motion.
Yeah, mine is. Yeah.
Can you just tell me what you're working on so I have it prepared? Okay, cool. We'll get this.
I love him. I just think he's
Alright, take your seats, please. Okay, we're starting the meeting. Cecilia, Samir, Cece, Bardia, please find your seats. Okay, alright, is there any further debate on this motion? Okay, so seeing no further debate, are there any objections to this motion?
Wait, I'm gonna.
Yeah,
Councillor Hunter speaking in favor for this motion. So with speaking to the executives, I think what we're going to do is leave the election to September, just so all council members are here and they all have the opportunity to join this, because I know there's probably people who are very passionate about it who aren't in the room right now. If you are interested in helping on this, I think we're going to do an informal group in the summer. There's a lot of things to work on. There's things with orientation. There's things with Queer Orientation Month. So if you are interested in helping, an email will be sent out by Megan, is what I've been told. So I express it is a really great committee, and it's really great to help in these issues. So if you are interested, respond to that email. Yeah.
Victoria Brosso, Science President. Can I just ask that we invite the coordinators or associates or appropriate people from Ally Western or Spectrum Western to be present for that election, just so that they're aware that that's happening in September?